So, Mike Figurato, or however you say his last name, I'm really not trying to butcher it if I am, in fact, but of the Humanist Report, he sent out a tweet the other day, rather interesting, talking about obviously his support for Bernie. And by the way, I get where he's coming from. We're going to read this tweet and we're going to discuss. But I think there's more of an underlying problem here with what he seems to be making a joke towards. And I really want to dive into that because I think this is seriously more of a problem than most people think it is. So let's take a look at this tweet and then we'll discuss, what are the underlying problems behind what he's, in my opinion, clearly mocking in this tweet. Let's take a look. Okay, so the tweet that he sent out was, I was going to vote Bernie until one of his supporters online was a bit rude to me. So I'm going to vote against my own self-interest to spite that person. So sorry, but my decision is final. Now, if you go and you look at that tweet, you read through some of the comments, there are people in there talking about, how the big mainstream supporters of candidates, even Bernie Sanders, their supporters tend to be the most, rude to other supporters, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now, it seems to me what he's trying to reference here are the people, the Bernie supporters, who are rude to other Bernie supporters who may defend Tulsi Gabbard, may even be Tulsi Gabbard supporters or Andrew Yang supporters. Because in my encounter, and this does not by any means speak for all Bernie Sanders supporters, this is more or less just speaking for some that I have encountered during my time on Twitter since I've started this channel. That hasn't been that long, honestly. One, I had to block because this guy was just going to argue till he was blue in the face. Okay, he had no intention of stopping. And pretty much the ones that I'm gathering from here are the ones who then, they almost like they have this entitled mentality that Bernie Sanders is king progressive. And because of that, Tulsi Gabbard does not deserve your vote. She's polling too low. Bernie Sanders is polling too well. King progressive here deserves your vote. And not only does he deserve it, but he's entitled to it. And so if you don't give it to him, you're basically committing an act of progressive treason, is seeming to be their mentality here. And this one guy in particular that decided he wanted to argue with me on Twitter, then started, he wanted to know, okay, so what are your issues? Because my thing is, and I've said this before, I think, honestly, and this is just personal opinion, Tulsi Gabbard may be a little bit more firm on her principles than Bernie is. And namely being is because Bernie cucked out to Hillary Clinton in 2016. Okay. What's even worse about that is this is someone who still to this day, as far as I know, claims he's an independent. Bernie. If you're not even a member of the, and this was my problem. If you're not even a member of the Democratic Party, why are you going to bend over backwards to kiss the Democratic Party and their nominee who both worked against you to screw you? Why are you going to bend over backwards to kiss their ass and you're not even a member of that party? That made no sense to me. And even after doing all of that butt kissing for Hillary Clinton, going out hitting the campaign trail for her, trying to stump up votes for her, okay, she still lost. That shows just how many people couldn't even do it just because Bernie wanted them to. Bernie was out there doing nothing but wasting his time and hurting himself, okay? So that's why when Hillary Clinton says he hurt her, it's an absolute load of garbage. He hurt himself more than he ever hurt her, okay? And there's a lot of people like myself who still look at that and say, ooh, that's bad, man. If you're going to cave that bad and kiss up to the Clintons, who were pretty much the epitome of things you'd been railing against for many, many years, what else would you cave on potentially if you became president? I mean, maybe Bernie doesn't cave on anything. Maybe Bernie's tired of caving. But to me, Bernie Sanders he's not the attack dog I think he needs to be. He's a little too polite. He's a little too nice. And he kissed too much ass when it came to Hillary Clinton. Now, does that mean I think Bernie Sanders is a terrible candidate? Absolutely not. Bernie Sanders still has a far better message and a better track record than most of the other people running in this Democrat primary. That's just a personal reason why I'm not putting him at the front of the pack here, okay? Tulsi Gabbard is still my number one, and Andrew Yang is a close second, okay? Bernie Sanders is a third, but he is a more distant third because of my trust issue with him for what I saw him do with Hillary Clinton. I'd still take him over the rest, minus obviously Yang and Tulsi. I would prefer him over any of those others, but he's not in the league, in my personal opinion, with Yang and Tulsi Gabbard. Again, like his message, just I lost a lot of respect for him when he did what he did with Hillary Clinton. To me, that's bowing down. I respect a man that stands up and defends himself, especially if something happened like what happened to him in 2016. If he'd have stood up for himself and just not have endorsed her at all and just stayed neutral on the issue, and he'd have had every right to because he got massively screwed over. If he'd have done that, I wouldn't have any problems right now. You wouldn't even be hearing me saying these things, okay? Because he did, to me, that shows a sign of you didn't respect yourself enough to stand up and fight for yourself. And you need to be willing to do that in my book, okay? But this guy on Twitter he's asking me, well, what's your stance on this policy or that policy? So we're going back and forth about it. And then, I don't see how you can think Tulsi Gabbard would be more firm on these issues than Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders has been doing this for far much longer, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's like this, my man. It's my personal choice. Who I want to vote for is my business. It ain't really your business who I vote for. It's not really your business who I support. Now, obviously, me being who I am, making these YouTube videos, I don't just sling that around to anybody and everybody. Feedback is great, but I took that tone when it got to the point that it didn't matter what I said to this guy. He was determined that he was going to prove to me how wrong I was about who I supported. He was taking a very pompous tone to try and tell me that I was a fool and a moron, and why everything I wanted, I should just be going for Bernie instead of wasting my time and hurting Mr. King, dear progressive here, Bernie Sanders. Here's the thing, guys. Anybody that wants to look at our country that way, you got a problem, my friend. This is a representative democracy. We live in a republic. No one is entitled to my vote. Pure and simple. You want it, you earn it. And if you can't earn it, you're not getting it. And I don't care how many progressives out there think Bernie Sanders is the next thing to God Almighty himself, okay? If he hasn't said what I want to hear and has done things that I don't particularly care for, and there's someone else on the field, I don't care if they're polling at 0.0001%. I'm the type of guy that will vote third party if I'm not satisfied with a Democrat or a Republican in the election. I'll do it in a heartbeat. This is the independent report, not the Democrat report, not the Republican report. The independent report. You know why? Because I am an independent. I will not conform and join the Democratic Party or the Republican Party because, in my opinion, they are both too bought and paid for. And just because there's a few good actors running in the Democratic primary does not mean I'm going to, I'm a Democrat. Or say there was someone like Ron Paul. I like Ron Paul on the Republican Party. Would I I'm a Republican? No. Not happening with this guy. You will not see it happen with this guy. I am an independent. I plan to stay an independent. And until I see a complete party reform, and I don't see that happening anytime soon, I think that's a big uphill battle. Now, if that ever happened one of these days, we can talk then. But that hasn't happened yet. So I'll vote for whoever I want to. And the problem here is there seems to be just a lot of these. Now, that's not to say there's maybe not some Tulsi supporters out there who may do the same thing. Some Yang supporters do the same thing. I don't want to make it just sound like it's only Bernie supporters. That's not my intention. It's just I've been seeing this more from Bernie supporters. Okay? If there's anyone out there that supports another candidate doing the same thing, whether it be Yang or Tulsi, and they're taking this tone, I would be saying the same thing about them too. Let democracy take its course. If your candidate is that great, then they'll win the votes, okay? that they'll be able to reach people and win the votes. And the only wild card you may be able to throw in there as an excuse is mainstream media blackouts and bias trying to silence their message and not being able to reach the people they need to reach to secure those votes because they're getting screwed over. And that does apply to Tulsi, Bernie, and Andrew Yang. Obviously, in my opinion, the biggest recipient of it, especially here lately, has by far become Tulsi Gabbard, when you basically exclude her from every graph and almost don't mention her period in the DNC, polling that they show on MSNBC and CNN. And they're basically pretending she doesn't even exist anymore. So she's definitely catching it, full on. Their foot's down on the gas for how bad they're trying to screw Tulsi Gabbard right now. But if your candidate's great and they're able to reach people, they'll win the votes. If they can't win the votes, your candidate must not be that great. There's more to being a successful leader than just having good policy. You have to be the one in the room to draw that attention to you. And while Bernie can do that to some extent, people, when he gets on that debate stage, they're tired of all these politicians. They're tired of all this bought and paid for corruption. They know, a lot of people know that this whole Russiagate, everybody's a Russian agent if they don't agree with the status quo. They know that's ridiculous, and Bernie pushed those talking points. Okay, and when he gets on the debate stage, all the Bernie people who say that we're fools for supporting Tulsi Gabbard, who took 2 chunks out of Kamala Harris's ass in 2 separate debates? Was it Bernie Sanders or was it Tulsi Gabbard? It was Tulsi Gabbard, okay? Why didn't Bernie get up there and do that? Because Bernie is playing it too timid. Bernie's playing it too timid. And to a lot of voters, maybe they don't want timid. Maybe they want to see that fighter. You do realize that's kind of how Trump got over as well as he did within the Republican Party, because people looked at him as that, I'm going to take on whoever, bring it on, I'll take you all on, outsider. Okay? Bernie Sanders has got the outsider part down, no doubt, but the I'll take you all on part, well, he didn't take on Hillary Clinton too well, did he? He bowed down to her at the end of the day. And then that brings me to the final point. This particular gentleman then said, well, you do realize that Tulsi Gabbard came out on Twitter back in 2016 and said that she would vote for Hillary Clinton too. Okay. She said she would vote for Hillary Clinton. Did she get out and go all up and down the country and campaign for Hillary Clinton? No. Did she get out and go all up and down this country and campaign for Hillary Clinton after being deliberately screwed over in a rigged primary by Hillary Clinton? No. Who did? Bernie Sanders. And when I gave the man that response, the response that I got back from him was, it doesn't matter. They both did the same thing. They both endorsed Hillary Clinton. Actually, it does matter, and that's not the same thing. He then went on to say, when I gave him the following response, that I had, quote, twisted myself into a pretzel. Not hardly. If you disagree with what I'm about to say, then you tell me what you think in the comment box below. But the analogy that I gave to him was, I said, okay, I twisted myself into a pretzel, with this response that I'm about to tell you. So if they both did the exact same thing, but one only said she would vote for, and I guess voted for, and the other said he would vote for, voted for, but then went up and down the country trying to sing their praises and secure more votes for her, and he did that after getting screwed over in a rigged primary by her. None of that Tulsi Gabbard did. The rigged part didn't even apply to her, but she didn't even get out and try to stump votes for her either. Okay? And yet you say they did the same thing. So let me ask you a question here. If someone came up to you and gave you a hug, well, that's a sign of affection. Just like voting, saying I would vote for someone and I guess campaigning. They're both a form of endorsements, but one takes it an extra step, right? But you say they're the same thing. Okay, so giving someone a hug is an act of affection, right? So if someone came up and gave you a hug, and then someone else came up, gave you a hug, offered to go down on you, and then went down on you and gave you oral sex, that's all the same thing because it's all just different forms of affection? Really? You would consider that the same thing? I have a feeling you would not. And of course, he didn't say in his response, he did consider them the same things. He just went on to say, you're trying to twist yourself into such a pretzel, bro. You're all over the place trying to make your argument. At that point, I said, okay, screw this. I'm not going to argue with those who refuse to listen whatsoever, and especially someone who's honestly going to sit there with, I'm assuming, a straight face, this is on Twitter, and say that what Tulsi did in regards to Hillary in 2016 and what Bernie did are the same things, okay? Now, breaking down the scenario that I gave, the whole hugging situation, okay, we'll say a hug is a vote, right? Tulsi voted for Hillary, Bernie voted for Hillary. But that's where it, well, other than the fact that they said they would vote, okay? That they would vote as well, okay? But we'll say that just the hug itself was the vote. But then Bernie went out and offered to campaign for Hillary Clinton, offered to go down, because I'm using that analogy because that it may as well have been what he did for her. You basically degraded yourself to go out and stump votes for someone who downright screwed over our, democracy and our election process and rigged the primary against you. And you offered to go out and stump votes for that person. So you offered to go down, and then you went out and hit the campaign trail and tried to stump up votes. So you basically went down on her, okay? And yet all that is the same thing as what Tulsi Gabbard did by saying, I will vote for her, and then I'm assuming did vote for her. Okay? Okay. Yeah. I don't know what planet you're living on to say that those are the same things, because by definition, anytime someone does something else that the other person didn't do, they didn't do the same thing. They didn't do the same thing. You simply cannot say that. If one person did way more than the other person, even if it was based on the same base thing, but one only did this and the other did that plus some other things, then they didn't do the same thing. That's pure and simple. Okay? And so he literally was just going to argue about it till he was blue in the face. And so let's be clear here, people. This is back to my original point. The people who are trying to just bludgeon Tulsi supporters or Andrew Yang supporters, who are diehard Bernie supporters, and if this is going in the other direction, vice versa, I'll condemn it the same way, okay? Let me tell you what you are going to do, okay? They may like their candidate for whatever reason, may halfway like your candidate, Bernie Sanders in this instance, and they are willing to say, okay, if he gets the nomination, I'd rather vote for him. But if it seems to get to the point, okay, that candidate's supporters are just a bunch of egotists who think that Bernie is entitled to their vote, and Bernie is not speaking out, he's not speaking up for Tulsi or anything else after Tulsi spoke out for him in 2016 and whatnot, okay? If he's not speaking up, he's not taking on the establishment, and his supporters are coming out basically being, or at least a few, however many there are. Again, I don't want to make this sound like it's all of his supporters, because I don't believe that. But if there's a fraction of his supporters, that's what we'll say, a fraction, who are basically being a bunch of boneheads coming out and trying to just attack Tulsi and Yang supporters, you're not going to get unity out of it. You're going to get a civil war amongst people who probably have a lot of the same goals at the end of the day as far as what they want out of a presidential candidate. Now, let's be clear here, people. When you cause that sort of a civil war, you're going to drive them to either not want to vote for that candidate or just not vote for that candidate anymore. They're going to say, you know what, I don't like this. These people were nothing but rude. So while you're downplaying that, Mike, over there on Twitter, just beware. If a civil war like that starts between these progressive farther left voters, don't get pissed, even if Bernie becomes a nominee, and then the base gets so divided over petty BS like that you end up handing the election over to Donald Trump again, because that is probably exactly what's going to happen if you keep on doing things like this. You're going to divide the base, split the base over petty infighting, and the end result is most certainly if you don't give it to him, you're certainly increasing Trump's chances of winning a second term in office. And meanwhile, it sounds like all of your goal is to get Trump out of office. So, yeah, keep on allowing all this infighting, not speaking out against it and pretending that it's some joke. And when Trump gets 4 more years in office, I don't want to hear a peep out of you.